everybody, to another episode of the Startup Junkies Podcast. Thanks for tuning in from wherever or however you're tuning in to us today. My name is Caleb. I am a startup junkie. I'm joined by my startup junkie co-hosts, Jeff Ameriine and Grace Gill. How are y'all today?
Doing great.
Yeah, doing well. Thank you.
It's a beautiful day in Arkansas today. I can say that for certain. It is
College
nice
football
out.
weather.
Exactly.
College football weather. Awesome.
Finally. Love it. We are excited to be joined by our new friend, Lloyed Lobo. Lloyd is an entrepreneur, author, a jack of all trades. I'm going to let him kind of dive into all of that. But Lloyd, thanks for joining us today.
Definitely. Thank you. I love that. Jote, not goat, but jote, jack of all trades. That's what founders should be in the early days. And I would say even until like maybe 10, 15 million in revenue, what happens is we lose our DNA sometimes as we graduate from being pirates to Navy. But being a jack of all trades, you can stretch a lot farther. Because as soon as, I've realized this in my company, is when you hire specialists and they're just like pigeonholed, but a startup is all about like, pivoting on the fly and trying different things as you make progress. So I love that jack of all trades.
No doubt about it. We used to have a requirement that everybody had to pass the Swiss Army knife test to join the Startup Junkie team.
You know what's funny is I'd use the Swiss Army knife phrase a lot. And then I guess a couple of podcasts I've been on, like maybe Gen Z hosts, they didn't understand what Swiss Army knife was. So I had, they're like, what is a Swiss Army knife? And then I showed a picture of a Swiss Army knife. And they're like, no, we've never seen anything like it. So it struck up an easy conversation, a good conversation. And I said, okay, jack of all trades. Does that make sense?
That's funny. Grace, you're Gen Z, but you have a Swiss Army knife, don't you? Would you carry one?
I do. I can be included not in the Gen Zs who don't know what a Swiss Army knife is.
What's funny is I never expected ever to ask that question because my slide decks and everything on like bootstrapping or building business has this one slide on hiring. And it used to say Swiss Army knife for the longest time. And maybe last week I changed it to jack of all trades because I was asked that a couple of times. Like, what is a Swiss Army knife? So I threw a picture. They're like, we've never seen that. What is that?
Nice. So Lloyd, tell us about, tell us your origin story. How did you get into entrepreneurship? Just tell us that ascension into all of this.
Definitely. I have a very interesting story into entrepreneurship. So probably not the traditional path or maybe accidental entrepreneur. So I was born in Kuwait, actually. And my parents are from India. My dad used to be a farmer in India. My mom grew up in the slums of Mumbai. And because they weren't very educated, they couldn't immigrate anywhere else. So their only option was to go to the Middle East back then. So they're working in the Middle East. Of course, like even if you're born in the Middle East, you don't get citizenship or anything there. You're just working there as an expat. And so I ended up being born in Kuwait. And my childhood summers, because my parents couldn't afford to go anywhere, was spending in the slums of Mumbai. And I think like everything I learned or my fondest childhood memories were in those slums where they didn't have a bathroom in the house. My mom had 9 siblings, parents, but going to the toilet was communal because you'd stand in lines, swimming in the puddles that would turn into ponds or eating food, watching TV, everything was communal. Fast forward a few years, we experienced the Gulf War, as you guys know, right? Like Kuwait was struck by the Gulf War, Iraq, Saddam Hussein. And I wake up one morning, grade 4, going to grade 5. My mom wakes me up and she's like, hey, I don't think you can go back to school. And we had just come from summer vacations in India. So I was like, yes, I don't have to go to school. But when the reality sank in, I realized that, man, this is a serious situation as a 9-year-old or so. And I go down the building and there's chaos, right? This is, security had lapsed. You didn't have cell phones or internet. You weren't sure if you're going to live or die. There were bombings. And people, in 2023, when we hear bad news, it perpetuates and it festers and it turns into engagement on social media into new monsters. But back then, people came together immediately to come up with solutions like, hey, I'll guard the building and I'll organize food supplies. And someone else is like, if you have displaced family members, we'll organize shelter. And every building became the sub-community that coordinated with the next building. It became a massive grassroots evacuation movement that communicated with embassies and eventually with governments and rescued us out of there. And probably at the time, I didn't realize this, but as I reflected back, I think my DNA of entrepreneurship started there, because when we ask what entrepreneurship is today, it's all about making money. But to me, what entrepreneurship is taking an obscure idea to execution and impact while dealing with extreme risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity. No bigger risk than being in the middle of a war. The other thing I learned was about leadership. Great leaders cascade purpose, not just goals. As a 9-year-old, Rambo was huge back then. I threw on like a red bandana and I was running around alongside my dad and other adults and helping in whatever way I can. And I felt like I was rescuing Kuwait. No adult made me feel like I was insignificant. And as I was researching and writing this book on Grassroots to Greatness, I found this story with President Kennedy was walking the halls in NASA. And at midnight, he sees the janitor sweeping the floor and he asks, "Hey, what are you doing at this hour?" And the janitor says, "Sir, I'm putting a man on the moon." And that's what great leaders do. They cascade purpose, not just goals, where even the lowest common denominator feels like they're driving it. And then the other thing, of course, I experienced was the power of people and community in creating impact when they're united by a big purpose. Fast forward a few more years, we end up in Canada. I didn't finish high school, but somehow I finagled myself into engineering. A key learning here is luck and risk are two sides of the same coin. What happens is most people don't flip long enough. Entrepreneurs keep flipping and flipping and flipping, risk, and eventually you get lucky. But how many kids would apply to university if they didn't finish high school? I didn't graduate with a high school diploma. I skipped all my exams. I didn't have a high school diploma, but I applied to every single university. One university, because in Canada, they don't have SATs. One university said, "Hey, why don't you come and write these exams, these tests?" And I wrote math and English. I passed, and they asked me for my transcript. I made up some excuse that they're on the way. There's political unrest in my country, and so the transcripts are not here. They let me start the semester, and they said, "If you don't give it to us within a month, you'll have to honor enroll." Luck would have it, they never followed up. I graduated with a bachelor's in software engineering. Like pure luck, right? But I got lucky because I actually applied. I don't think any kid would ever apply to university if they didn't finish high school. I had like older transcripts. When I graduated, I just didn't want to work anywhere. I didn't want to do this traditional 9 to 5. Probably driven by this desire for risk. Like I had this massive risk appetite. I went from this kid who spent his summers in the slums and then the Gulf War, rebellious teen who didn't finish high school to finagling into engineering. So I wanted to get a job that was more aligned with entrepreneurship. And back then, in 2004, 5, we wouldn't use the word entrepreneurship. We wouldn't use the word startup. It was just business people, businessmen. So I asked a few business people, "Hey, what's the best skill I could learn?" And they told me your communication kind of sucks in a nice way. You're an awkward engineer. The best skill you can learn is communication, because everything as an entrepreneur is communicating, right? Like convincing your spouse that you're not going to bring money, or convincing customers when you don't have a product, or convincing early employees to join you on low pay. Now I knew that would be a hard thing for me to do. See, self-motivation is very difficult. And not a lot of people, I would say 95% of the people, although we write on job descriptions, we want self-motivated individuals. We're not self-motivated. Self-motivation is not when the conditions are perfect, you show up. It's like when you repeatedly punch in the face, are you going to show up? And my worry was, I was so awkward at communicating, public speaking. I hated it growing up, that if I did like public speaking coaching or any coaching classes or read books, as soon as a hard time fell on me, I would just back out and quit. So I started applying to sales jobs because I knew that, the only way to learn something that you suck at is to put yourself in an environment that forces you to do that something over and over again. Now, another key lesson here is the importance of the people you surround yourself with, right? You become the average of the people you surround yourself with. Luck would have it, I kept applying to sales jobs. Nobody would give me a sales job. No Xerox, no small tech company, nobody. I only applied to tech companies that needed sales jobs. There's a small startup where they gave me a sales job doing cold calls, not even selling, like make some cold calls, dial for dollars. My parents lost it. Graduated software engineering, Indian parents, immigrant parents. Our friends' kids are at Microsoft and that, and you're cold calling. Fast forward today, I'm everything I am because of that skill. And I think the first call I made, I practiced 4 hours and the decision maker shows up and I hang up the phone. Everyone's laughing. But then you carry on because you signed up for that job. You can't quit. And I kept cold calling. I learned how to pivot my messaging on the fly. I learned how to polish things. I learned how to negotiate. My wife was in medical school in New Jersey. My wife, now girlfriend at the time. And I wanted to move to the States. So I started applying then for jobs in the States, and I get a job now at another startup. See, the function of working in a startup that's early stage alongside a founder, you learn more than the job at hand, right? You become this jack of all trades. You're learning cold calling, you're learning messaging, marketing. You're in the purview of a lot of things. And so I started applying for jobs, and I get a job at a supply chain startup in New Jersey. I land there, and it's not a sales job. They don't have a repeatable, scalable product. They're like, okay, talk to these customers, figure out what to build. Oh, by the way, also draw wireframes. Back then, product management also wasn't a big skill or a job description. So figure out what they need to build, the developers, and wireframe it. And oh, by the way, you also need to launch the marketing site and marketing materials. Now, the thing is, I couldn't quit. I'm in a situation where I'm on a free trade visa in the US. I want to be with this girl who, has supported me entirely. Like I did 3 startups that failed, and she paid the bills and had a good exit. And here we are, but it wouldn't have been possible without her. So I couldn't quit. And so I kept learning. I got the opportunity to meet now large customers like Tiffany, Armani, large enterprises in person, learn, get their requirements, wireframe, which I knew kind of from studying software engineering, but polished that, learned everything about marketing, launching websites. And then my next job ended up being VP of sales in another startup when she got into residency at Drexel in Philly. And then I had hit a ceiling, and my best friend from university called me and he said, let's do a startup. I'm like, rather than making no money working at a startup that's venture backed and not going anywhere, which was 3 startups, all failed. They were all venture backed. Nobody made money. Like, we may as well roll the dice on our own ideas. And that was the journey to starting. But I think if I had to reflect back, a few things, the DNA of being around people and community, the DNA of being surrounded by risk, and I think 3 very crucial skills for anyone wanting to start a company is communication, creation, and consistency. If you can communicate well, you can create everything, right? From content to products is all creation. And I was at the heart of that. And then last one is consistency. If you're not consistent, you'll never win. Consistency is the magic ingredient that turns small actions into big outcomes.
That was fantastic. That was really good. Thanks for taking us through that. As you reflect back on that whole journey, was that the inspiration for writing the book? And talk a little bit about the book.
Definitely. So the book, From Grassroots to Greatness, 13 Rules to Build Iconic Brands with Community-Led Growth. So I'll fast forward the journey a little bit. So, when I was in New Jersey and I had to now learn sales and marketing, and this was not the pick up the phone, dial for dollars sales marketing. This was like talk to large enterprise customers, close deals, negotiate, figure out requirements, build the website, build marketing materials, video marketing. I was lost, and everything I was Google searching at the time on digital marketing was coming up from HubSpot. HubSpot back then didn't quite have a product, but they had this inbound marketing certification, inbound marketing community. So I became part of that community. Fast forward then, ran sales and marketing for another venture-backed startup, and I started getting involved in the startup community. When we started Boast, our fintech company, I couldn't get customers. My cold calling techniques wouldn't work. And we were forced to build a community, because what we're doing at Boast is we automate government funding for businesses. If you're developing new products, improving existing products, there's hundreds of billions globally by governments to fund these companies doing product development. The thing is, it's a cumbersome application process. It's prone to frustrating audits, and it takes a long time to get the money. So we set out to automate it. My co-founder was doing that at a large Big Four accounting firm. Now, the thing is, when you're starting out and you're two people and you cold call and you say, give me your IP and give me your financials and I'll get you money, which is the best form of capital because there's no interest and no equity, they're going to be like, sounds like a scam, right? Like, or if they heard of it, they're working with Big Four accounting firms. So we were actually forced to build a community to create social proof, which eventually paid off, and it became our tribe and went from doing 10-person meetups to now 120,000 subscribers, and folks like Twilio's CEO and Uber CEO has been to our events. But nonetheless, we chanced into it because, I guess necessity is the mother of all inventions, and I'll dive into that framework. And so all my life, if you see Summers in the Slums of Mumbai, Gulf War, HubSpot community, build this traction community to drive growth for Boast, I was always surrounded by community. But one other thing was common. I never had any money. Piss poor, living on wife, living on other people. And then late 2020, we sold 50% of the company. Now, the fortunate thing, and I can also talk about this as advice for founders, is we often chase this other people's definition of success, which is raise venture capital. But there's more than one way to build a successful company, and bootstrapping, right? So we did Boast, and in parallel, we did two other startups. One was in an accelerator, one was venture backed, and they both failed also. And so Boast, we bootstrapped to 10 million ARR. When we did that, we sold 52% to a growth equity firm. Me and my co-founder became millionaires overnight, multimillionaires overnight. But because we had bootstrapped, we still own nearly 40% of the company. We have 2 board seats, and we gave 10% to employees. So that worked out. I came into millions when I had not seen that kind of money. I don't think either side of my family had seen that kind of money ever. I ended up depressed when that happened. I hit rock bottom. I became drunk. I became overweight. As a function of leaving the day-to-day of the company and transitioning out, I got so depressed. I never realized this would happen to me, but I got depressed. And so in my depression, I started calling random friends around the world and saying, I'm coming up, I'm coming to your city, or I'll fly you, like come to Mexico or come to like Dominican Republic and I'll fly you. And I was like, I have work. So I'd just show up at their doorstep. And things came to a head when I was speaking at the Technovania conference in Romania. And now there's this speaker retreat after the conference, and we're maybe 3.5 hours, 4 hours from the Bucharest airport in the boonies. And at 2 a.m, when everyone's chilling at the pool, I'm frantically trying to find a car. And all these speakers from Silicon Valley, they're asking me, what the hell are you doing? And I keep the Uber on, it's searching. Maybe 30 minutes later, our sound goes ding, and this Uber is on the way. When the Uber shows up, I tell them to hold for like 2 minutes. I pack my bags, I book a flight to Costa Rica, and I said, let's go. That's how crazy I became. I would just show up wherever friends were because I felt I lost my tribe. And when I got back home from all of this, my wife is a physician. So she let me grieve, bright Stanford doc, right? She let me grieve. She let me do my thing. But then she's like, listen, you've now had some time to grieve, and you're in a position to do anything you want, live anywhere. But you choose to look at the glass that is half empty, and you're moping. You're attached to this company that you built your identity around. You neglected your family for the last 10 years, right? I got 3 kids, and you spend no time with us, but you care more about not being in the day-to-day of the company, and you've become insufferable, overweight. If something happens to you and you die, we're going to be left holding the bag. And so that day, as I was reflecting, I found my Peloton bike, which is, for most people, it's a clothing rack, right? There's stuff all over it. I dust it off, I hop on, and there's something to be said about bringing your vulnerable self to build connection. The instructor, Robin Arzon, she was coming off maternity leave, and she said, I can't ride. I don't feel as strong. I haven't ridden in a while. And then she yells out, self-pity is toxic. You don't need that shit. One crank, one shift, one ride around the block. I can, repeat after me. So that ride flew by, and 1 turned into 2 and 4. And I went on this, transformation journey surrounded by Peloton and a fitness community. And so when I was reflecting back and I came upon all this free time, I said to myself, like, man, all my life I had no money and I was happy. The only time I became depressed when I had all the money in the world. But but no community. I felt I lost my tribe. And so in a path of self-discovery, I started researching. We had a lot of content from our traction community, like maybe 400 or 500 videos that I rewatched. I started reconnecting with all community members, community leaders, probably like 1,000 people I talked to, joined a lot of communities behind the scenes, like On Deck. I was already part of SaaStr. I joined YouTuber communities and started researching all these brands. And I found that there's a massive common connection between every obscure small idea that eventually went on to become an enduring global phenomena, from Christ to CrossFit. Every obscure idea that eventually went on to become this enduring global phenomena had 4 stages in common. People listen to you or buy your product or service, you have an audience. When you bring that audience together to interact with one another, it becomes a community. Now, when the community comes together to create impact towards a greater purpose, far greater than your product or profit, it becomes a movement. And when that movement has undying faith in its purpose through sustained rituals, over time, it becomes a cult or a religion. So audience, community, movement, religion. And community, meaning bringing people together, was at the core of this. Like even companies like OpenAI, we talk so much about ChatGPT and OpenAI. It wouldn't exist without the community it built. The community was feeding its data. I was part of that. We fed it a lot of data too. And we get latched on to this innovation and technology so much, right? Like .com company. We don't say .com company anymore. We don't say web company, social company, mobile company, cloud company. We won't say AI company anymore. Yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. And if you look back to the 80s, the innovation back then was electronics. But what happened in the 80s? The Japanese manufacturers commoditized electronics. Harley Davidson almost went bankrupt. The leadership came out and said, we're going to rebuild the company on the ethos of community. They went out and started writer clubs. Employees became writers. Writers became employees. They had weekend rituals around the camaraderie and brotherhood of writing, the joys of writing. But they started to create impact by raising funds for different campaigns like breast cancer and autism. They rescued Harley. Today's Harley is worth more than $5 billion. But more importantly, Harley is an iconic brand. You can recognize a Harley fan no matter what they're wearing. And so realize that yesterday's innovation always becomes tomorrow's commodity. But if you build a community, you will not become a commodity. And that was my purpose of writing it. And, not just my journey battling this depression, but loneliness is the number one killer in America. And I even found these blue zones of 5 places around the world. I don't know if you've heard of them, where people live functionally until they're 100. Functionally is key because if you don't have functionality and you live long, it doesn't matter. And these places had 9 traits. 4 or 5 of those traits out of the 9 had to do with human-to-human connection. And so I said, what better time to talk about this book coming from someone who built an AI company by the power of community than now. So I had my purpose. It's like I have free time. I've always worked, like, as far as I can remember, work long hours anyway. So I wasn't able to sit still and hang out on the beach. So I said I'll write a book on community and the impact of it.
Very compelling. I mean, that's fantastic. I want to get Grace in. I'm sure she has some questions. Fire away, Grace.
Sure. I mean, it's definitely interesting the way you talk about community, just in the sense of even in technology. I mean, you spent most of your career in startup technology, which we think of, especially in AI, being like less humans. But the more that, you bring humans into it, make it people centered, that's going to be more successful for your technology. So that's a really key point that I think that not a lot of people are talking about. So that's super interesting. But I guess if you want to maybe talk a little bit more about kind of the process of building up a company, and also just like you mentioned that you kind of did a lot of different things, but then you also had that resilience of, you can't quit when things are hard. So how do you find that balance of when you need to, dive deep, really get through and work, and when is it time to kind of move on, look at the next thing, get new opportunities? Like, how can you tell, for at least for yourself, when it's time
to move on? It's really, really hard. And I read this quote from, I don't know, this Indian philosopher, or I don't know what he is, a guru, Osho, that said, all of our worries are nothing but attachment. And if we think about it, it's so true. when you're a founder, especially when you're a bootstrap founder, you put a lot on the line, your family, your friends, everything to run this business. And this business becomes your identity, much like a child is to a mother in many cases. And so like when you bring on external investors, eventually it's like, telling a mom that, hey, I know you can't afford it, but I'm going to pay your kid all the way through college. I'm going to pay for all your living expenses. Harvard, I'm going to get them into Harvard and whatnot. But you know what? I need a monthly call with you, and we're going to decide how you're going to raise this kid. It becomes very hard, right? It becomes like not very many people will sign up for that for any amount of money. But as founders, we tend to sign up for that all day long, and we bring difficulty upon us. But I think, and you guys know this, right? When you are in the thick of everything, it feels like you're throwing spaghetti on the wall, from finding your first customers to like going through pivots. But as you look back, you've now built a multi-million-dollar company. It feels like a framework. So in the early days, what was really interesting was when we started, there were 3 companies we did in parallel, or more or less in parallel. We did a chatbot in 2013 called Automatically. That failed. We did an AI sales assistant, which was incubated by Bessemer. They put the founding team together, and it would like before the call prep you for the meeting, during the call guide you on what to say, and after the call tell you who to follow up with and update your CRM. That also failed, blew through 6 million. And Boast, we had bootstrap, and we actually, interestingly, we didn't build any product at Boast, nothing. It was basically talk to customers, understand their pain points, offer to do the service manually, right? Because customers want an outcome. They don't want software. And when you offer the service manually, you can't hide from the outcome, right? You can't hide behind, UX and button and implementation time. The customers want an outcome. That's it. Like, where the hell is my outcome? And it enabled us to be good at consultative selling and customer success. And over time, what's really interesting is we were able to understand what were all the breakpoints, what took long, and what to eliminate and what to automate. And we knew the process of getting the customers that outcome very well, that we said, okay, you know what? We're pulling data manually through Excel files. Why don't we just ingest this through APIs? And then now, what do you do with this data? You got to normalize it because you got structured and unstructured data. And then the last step is workflow. Let's write some code to fire workflow. Our first version at Boast, I think when we were more than $1 million in revenue, was a no-code solution. We used Zoho Creator, and we leveraged Zapier. Not many startups would follow that path. But the thing is, we had only experienced failure as building product before, right? So I think, when do you hang it up? Startups are built in phases, in my view. And most people don't view it this way. I never did. But reflecting back, it feels like a framework. When you're in, it's throwing spaghetti on the wall. So phase 1, you have an idea. You got to validate this idea. How do you validate it? What is validation? To me, let's say it's B2B. And let me ask you this. In Arkansas, are most of the startups B2B or B2C?
A lot of B2B. A lot of focus on selling into large enterprise because of where we are.
Exactly, right? I think most of America and generally most of the world, I think, is a lot more B2B SaaS kind of enterprise or mid-market SMB software versus consumer. So that's good. So this will put things in context better. And so validation, what is validation? To me, validation is you get 5-10 unaffiliated customers to pay you to try it out. That means not your relatives, but actually people who don't know you, to pay you to try it out. So how do you get validation then? What are the leading indicators of validation? You're having hundreds of conversations, your message is resonating, and they said, hey, I have a problem, your solution kind of resonates, I'll pilot or I'll pay you to try it out. That is validation. You're doing nothing else as a founder. And this is all founder-led sales, right? It's like the founder is going out there, one of the founders is doing it, one of the founders is building to that vision. And, when you are thinking of validation, it's very, very important in that early stage to hone in on your ideal customer profile. And this is what we tried to do. And now we lucked into this, figuring out the ideal customer profile. But the way I tell people is, if you have an idea and you don't have an ideal customer profile, then don't start. Figure out who you're going to serve. Understand their pains and goals, but also understand their aspirations, because the aspiration is forever. Your problem, your customer problem or goal will give you the first product. But every company that's 100 million ARR has multiple products. And so if you understand the customer's aspiration, then you'll go on the journey of building now your future products and understanding what stands in their way. But for us, when we started to validate, we started calling oil and gas, supply chain, manufacturing, construction, enterprise companies. Nobody would take our calls, right? No, it was so hard. So we said, why don't we just go to events and try to meet these people? And we started hitting up these events, and we looked like two guys who threw on a suit and top of a hoodie, and they were like cigar club. So it was impossible to vibe with them. Dejected, we started going to the startup events, and we felt such great camaraderie. They became our friends. We started hanging out together, partying together, drinking together, and even like participating in hackathons together. And so that became our first market. Now, looking back, it was just we lucked into it. But, as I reflect on what was the framework, is you need to come up with an ideal customer profile. How do you figure that out? For me, number one is, do you have the passion for this audience? Do you like this audience? Because building a company is a marathon of the heart and mind, right? It's a labor of love. If you hate your customers, how can you create? How can you sustainably create for long? You're eventually going to just like burn out. So you got to love your customers. You got to be in love with their problems and spending time with them. A lot of the CEOs, the founders' job is to go out and spend time with these customers. Even once you're at scale, at scale, even more, you're just getting on planes and spending time with them. The second thing is this a growing niche? I like small niches that are growing, because in small growing niches, you find more white spaces versus in like large saturated niches. The third is there a propensity to pay? And the fourth, is there ease of access? I mean, you can tackle the biggest market in the world, but if there's no ease of access, then you're done. So you may as well start somewhere you have a passion and you have the ease of access. So for me, that is like how you come up with the target market. Start hitting them up, network, cold call, cold email, refine your message, get 10 people to pay you to try it out. And at that point, maybe you get 50, 100K ARR. Next phase is product market fit. Now, product market fit just means that the people who paid you to try it out, it actually worked for. Anytime they have that problem, they keep coming back. So your goal of product market fit is retention, high retention. And so your leading indicator is engagement. They keep using the product. A lot of us in the B2B world, we sell these annual contracts. If your customers are not using the product, no matter how many multi-year products you sold, they will churn at the end of time. Right? It's like a gym membership that nobody uses. As soon as they notice the credit card, eventually they're going to cancel. So I think engagement and onboarding is the leading indicator of retention. And here now, you're probably still doing founder-led sales, but you go from one founder to maybe you hire 2 sales reps that you can coach on the messaging. And you graduate now from being a founder to a manager. Like a lot of us delude ourselves saying, oh, we're C-suite. You're not. You're an individual contributor that maybe becomes a manager. Then you graduate to being to the next phase, which is product channel fit. You figure out one repeatable, scalable way to acquire customers. And it could be sales, it could be community, it could be any number of things, but one repeatable, scalable playbook. And here, the repeatability is key, right? Your CAC LTV ratio should be high. Your payback period should be really low. Those are the key metrics of that phase. And now here as a founder, you graduate to being a VP. You probably hired a manager to manage these sales reps or whoever, and you've gone to being a VP. You're still like involved in the tacticals. Now, once you have like one kind of customer coming through one kind of channel, which is like, validated the customer type, validated the product, so one kind of value, and validated the channel, one kind of channel, then you can go on to scale. And at scale, you pour 75% of your energy on putting fuel on the fire, one kind of customer, one kind of value, one kind of channel. And 25%, you try new things, new products, new markets, new technologies, injecting risk in the business kind of thing. What a lot of us also make mistakes on is we hit scale, we raise like tens of millions, and then now we're like, oh, we'll build a whole team in Europe, or we'll build this whole new product. They forget the whole, we used to validate And we used to make sure it works on a small subset, right? And so that's the journey I think founders go on. And when to hang up is if you can't make a go of it. Like, to me, it's a labor of love, but it's also an experiment. If you are, no matter what you do, you're not hitting a retention metric, you know this business is going to fail. So you don't have product market fit and you got to pivot. Or you have very high retention and you're trying to figure out a repeatable, scalable channel, but like it's very, very costly. You can't figure out a way to get customers. And you got to like pivot again. You got to see like, what am I doing here that's wrong that I can change to get my cost? I mean, there's no sense in building a business where it takes you 3 years to pay back a customer or 2 years, or you can't just figure out the channel. I mean, it feels good that you got 10 customers that pay you, but it's not going to be a scalable venture if you can't go easily get the 11, 12, 13, 14. So that's how I look at it is if you can't get a pass on the experiment, then you pivot or you move on, right? Like, so validation, you talk to hundreds of people, you can't even, this is a mistake a lot of us make at the validation phase is we go and immediately want to raise seed round. But if you can't convince 5, 10 people to pay you to try it out and you go and build product, then it's a 50-50, right? You don't know if you're going to pass or fail. But if you can't get it, for sure, if I can't convince 10 people to pay me to try it out, how do I know if I build a product, I can convince them?
Yeah, I love your point of view on that, because something that we coach and something I've experienced through the 9 up and down startups I've had over a long career is you have to be a consultant to your own idea, and you have to try to kill it at every step of the way yourself by getting that validation or invalidation so that you don't continue to waste your time if it's not going to work. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't have the burn the ships attitude that you're all in, but you need to be open to the idea that markets are ruthlessly efficient. Just listen to what they're telling you. And if you can't find people that will pay, or if you don't have validation that it solves a problem that's big enough for your ideal customers to be excited about it, move on. I mean, you don't keep beating yourself in the head with that 2x4 if it's not going to work. The way you laid that out is really great, though. It's super great point of view.
Yeah, I mean, like, when we were doing it, we never felt like, we just felt we were running. And as I was reflecting back, I thought like life would just be more calm if we tried to solve one major goal at one phase of being a startup. Validation, nothing else. I don't need the sexiest website and I don't need this product with all the bells and whistles. I just need 10 people to pay me to try it out. And if I can't, then maybe I shouldn't be doing this, right? Or at product market fit, it's not about like, hiring all these fancy people and raising a seed round. It's, can these 10 people get value from it that they want to keep coming back? And sometimes, it's not sometimes, all the time, you have to keep failing to learn the lesson. Otherwise you don't. It's like my kids, right? Like you tell them, don't put your finger in the fire, and they won't listen. They'll see a wood fire and they'll go and burn themselves. And they're, okay, you know what? I'm not going to do that the next time.
Right.
You have to. As founders, we're all very arrogant. That's the unfortunate thing. And if we're not, we wouldn't be founders anyway. So we got to make the mistakes to learn it.
Yeah, no doubt.
One of the ways we like to, land the plane on an episode is we invite our guests to hop in their time machine and go back, to whatever point in time you want to take that time machine back to before you started all this, before maybe you moved. But knowing everything that you know now, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think it's hard to change anything because I feel like I truly believe in karma and luck. I don't know. Most people laugh at me when I say this, but I truly believe my life is like series of one luck after the other. And it's also because the luck happened because I kept flipping. But if I had to give myself advice, it would be only one thing. Actually, 2 things. One, all of your troubles are going to be nothing but attachment. Don't be so attached. Move on from your ideas, from whatever you feel tied down to. 2, don't build your identity around a company, right? Like self-care is not selfish. It's good stewardship towards the only way you can create value in the world. This is president of Atlassian one day told me this, and it really struck, it sank in. But later in life, probably in the last year. And so as founders, what we do is we burn ourselves out. We work so much and we put everything else on the back burner. And we eventually realize at the time of gain, everything is great. But if you haven't gained anything and only lost, you've not only lost the company, but you've also lost a lot of loved ones and a lot of time and good health. And so I think that self-care is not selfish. Focus on taking care of yourself. It's like your oxygen mask first. Don't be attached to things. And yeah, I think if you do those things well, everything will work out. And actually the last thing, but this is not advice I needed to take. It was my life always, is it's neither the destination nor the journey. We often say it's not the destination, it's the journey, or it's the journey, it's not the destination. It's neither. It's the companions that matter the most. You could be on a crappy journey on the way to hell, but great companions make it memorable. I've sat in like Paris in a chateau sipping champagne with toxic people and I wanted to get out of there. But as a kid, I was swimming in the puddles of the slums of Mumbai and I didn't want to leave. And I'm everything I am because I only work for founders. So companions matter the most, right? So it naturally made sense. A lot of what we become, our mental health, our well-being, is the people we surround ourselves with. And actually one more thing, I think this is key. This is key for all founders. You know, the media has perpetuated this addiction to unicorn porn, right? But what happened? I mean, me being in Silicon Valley, I've seen what happened in the last 2 years. Everyone needed to digitally transform. Interest rates were low. Money flooded the market. When it wasn't sustained growth, it was a black swan event. When that need for digital transformation stopped, the projections started to go down. Combined with interest rates going up, the market fell. Valuations fell. We have a graveyard of unicorns that we don't publicly talk about. In reality, right, the media perpetuates this addiction to unicorn porn. In reality, the world is run by horses, camels, and donkeys. The issue is we get so latched onto this unicorn porn that our first instinct is let's go raise money. When you go to raise money, a VC 100 out of 100 times is coming from the mindset of how do I return my whole fund? You can't blame them for it. Like the VCs get a lot of undue hate. You can't blame them. They take money from institutions and high net worth individuals. And their promise is we're going to deliver you outsized return. If they don't deliver outside return, why would I or like, you know, any like institution put money in a VC fund? You can put it in the S&P 500. And over 10 years, it returns 10%. I'm doing it for outsized return. And so then that creates this misalignment where the VC needs to force the founder to grow triple, double, be on this trajectory. And you're at a point where, let's say you raise your first round at coming out of accelerator, say 5-10 million valuation. At the worst case scenario, a VC wants a 3x return. They want 100x. That's how they pick every company is going to be a 100xer. But at the worst case, they want a 3x. Right? The valuation. So 10 million, 30 million, you can sell a company. Now, let's say you raise a Series A at a 50 million. So maybe you can sell the company for 150 million. But now let's say you raise a Series B at 100 million. There's not very many companies doing acquisition offers at 300 million. So at some point at your Series B, you're actually signing up for an IPO. Most founders don't recognize this. Most founders are focused on, and I was there, polishing the pitch deck to make it look like a unicorn, sell the vision. And there's this immediate misalignment. I think founders would be happier and find other avenues of fundraising because I was there, right? We only worked for venture-backed companies and did an accelerator one, and they all failed. And then my only success ever came from bootstrapping a company and eventually asked the question that, what is your personal definition of success? Not money, but what is that personal definition of success? Well, maybe that is like chilling in Bali for the rest of your life, or I don't know, writing a book or doing things that bring you joy, basically. What is the thing that you're going to do when you exit this company? Number one, what is your personal definition of success? How much money do you need in your bank account to do that forever? Is there a version of this company you don't want to work for? How long do you see yourself running the company for? And based on that, then figure out the kind of capital requirements you have, because great companies, great relationships, great cultures are built on great alignment. If you're misaligned, like you exaggerate the vision the VC, because most of them are not founders, they keep buying into this and it creates this friction. And so I think if you spend the time to align on what your personal definition of success is and how much money you need in your bank account, I think a lot of founders would be happier today.
Some amazing wisdom. And you said, and I'm an old guy and I'm seldom really at this point impressed by what people say. That was really, really impressive. I have to tell you, and very well put. Where can our audience find out more about you and what you're up to now? What's the best way for them to check out what you're up to?
Definitely. I'm on LinkedIn, Lloyed Lobo. There's an E in my name, Lloyed. Recently I've been busy. I don't post more than once a week, but I post at least 2-3 times a week otherwise on like founder mindset, mental health, entrepreneurship, mostly bootstrapping and building communities, like unconventional ways to grow. The book will be on From Grassroots to Greatness.com. And we'll go for a big announcement next week. The book also will have a bonus content page at FromGrassrootsToGreatness.com/bonus. That'll be free for everyone, whether you buy the book or not. You sign up, it'll be a summary of each chapter with behind the scenes interviews and templates to help you build an audience, turn it into a community, turn it into a movement and a cult, hopefully. I didn't build a cult or a movement. I stopped at community, but I talked to enough people that I created and wrote the frameworks from them to do that. And so, yeah, those two sources. We'll put all the podcasts on the website From Grassroots to Greatness as well. There'll be a podcast section, our Traction podcast, as well as all the places podcasts that I've appeared on, like this one, will be on the website as well. So you can learn everything about building a capital efficient company with the power of people.
Thanks for coming on. This was really time well spent. It's good to get to know you, and best of luck with all that comes next.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Caleb and Grace. This was a great conversation. Warms my heart. Thank you.
Absolutely. We'll be looking for you when you come back to the States,
much.
when you come back to Arkansas.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Awesome. See ya.
All right. Take care.
Ecosystem builders, entrepreneurs, chambers of commerce, mayors. If you're interested in taking your economic future into your own hands, we've got a book that can help you. Creating Startup Junkies, Building Sustainable Venture Ecosystems in Unexpected Places is the guide. It's a little bit inspiration. It's a little bit toolkit. What it will allow you to do is take your economic future into your own hands and build a sustainable small business, innovation, and entrepreneurial ecosystem in your backyard. If you'd like to hear more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. The Startup Junkie Podcast reaches over 100 countries and has had over 100,000 downloads. If you're interested in reaching some of the most motivated and engaged innovators and entrepreneurs on a worldwide basis, give us a shout.